back to trying to recast these 4th edition High Elf shields. In particular, I'm wanting 20 or so of that particular pattern there. The way I see it is, these are the shields that came with the boxed set to glue onto the spearmen, and there's 4 or 5 different designs in here. But the way I see it is that the designs would be ideal for the different types of units you get in the High Elf army. So the one here with the sea dragon coming out of the waves there, ideal for the Lothern Sea Guard unit. You have what looks like a phoenix coming up from the flames there. Not useful perhaps, but the phoenix guard, that would have been an ideal shield for those miniatures. The horse head there, good for the Reaver Knights, the mounted unit. Shadow Warriors perhaps there with the sword and the heart. And then the dragon design for the dragon princes. And as it happens, I've got I think about 7 or so of those already, so I don't need any more. I'd only need 5 really for that. But this design I've only got 5, so I need a lot more. I've also got the Sea Guard miniatures, so I need more of those. So the plan now is to do a 2-part mould using silicone and pouring resin to see if I can get a better result. I have tried other methods using blue stuff, silicone putty to make moulds, and then using products like green stuff or other things like milliput and whatever else, and I don't like the results. These shields are delicate, they're thin, they've got the little design on them, and those methods aren't working for me. So I'm going to switch now to doing a 2-part mould and see if I can get a better result, because I want the results to be indistinguishable from the originals. So I kind of want a high quality result. Making a start with creating the first half of the mould just with a Lego construction here, just some walls for the Lego, and I'm going to array the shields in here. But first I need a bed of modelling clay, so I've just got a big lump of modelling clay and I'm going to put down a bed of that in there. Okay, I've got the bed of modelling clay in place. I'm going to need to fit in a part here. This is just a bit of a helicopter model kit, and that is going to form part of what would be the kind of pouring point, the sprue if you like, where the resin will come down to the bottom of the mould, because the mould will be upright when I'm using it. The resin will come in here along and up into the shield spaces and rise up through them is my plan. So I just need to make sure that I leave room for that and then dig down into there. The shields themselves, rather than trying to press them down into the clay, planning on putting some clay in the back of them, kind of building them up a little bit, with my aim being to get some modelling clay up to the halfway point on the edges. You want that halfway point in the mould to be where the original halfway point would have been when these shields were originally cast, just to help with the mould lines. As the clay gets a bit warmer when you're working it, it gets a bit easier to manipulate into where you want it. It'll be something like that for each of them, and then a case of arraying them in a way that makes sense. So again, my plan is to have them at an angle so the resin has a chance of coming in from below, rising up and heading out into the next shield, and having as few chances for the air to get trapped. So I'm thinking if I do them at kind of 30 degree, 45 degrees, the resin has a chance of getting in, rising up through the shield and not trapping air anywhere in it. Probably will still get bubbles. I don't have any vacuum chambers or pressure pots to use here, so this is just going to be about as good as I can get it, but that's the idea. So I'll carry on making these and then set them out in here and blend them into the clay below them. So I'm just trying to work them into this mould, smooth it out, and leave these shields kind of protruding up. I can add more of the modelling clay where I need it, but for a start I'm just going to work them in like this. Not sure if this is going to work at all, but I'm just going to give it a go, where I'm trying to avoid paying through the nose for shields on eBay, where they're quite expensive, or they're very expensive now. I just want to make sure there's a seal around each shield in terms of where the clay is, but I also want to make sure there's a bit of a ridge just where the plastic meets the clay. Just using one of these cheap tools that you can pick up on Amazon or wherever. I think the more time I spend here, the better the end result will hopefully be, if this works. I will still need to cut in, you know, sprues, if you like, joining channels between the shields and up to the top. And I'm almost thinking of doing that in the second half of the mould and cutting it with a knife to make little channels. Thinking of doing it that way. I just need to form the clay around what will become the pouring point. Again, just try to come up roughly to the halfway point around the plastic. I'm just using this because it's a convenient shape. Could be anything really. Okay, that's most of it done now. Kind of want to make sure that the modelling clay is smooth to a degree anyway. The pattern over it's fine. I just don't want to have any overhangs or underhangs, that kind of thing. So I think a few more shapes to help with alignment when the two models, when the two halves of the mould go together. So I might just carve in a few shapes like that. There's not a huge amount of room. And then can maybe just inset a few of these stainless steel bearings. These are just useful for aligning the two halves when the plastic shields are not there. Okay, I think that'll do it for the mould. What I'm going to do now is just raise the height of the Lego around the outside, so I've got more of a cavity to fill with the silicone. I'll mix up some silicone and get it poured. Okay, I've got a couple of mixing cups here and some liquid silicone 2-part type stuff. Doesn't really matter about the brand, there's so many of them online. It's not really worth mentioning which I'm using. So I'm going to mix up about 250 millilitres. This stuff cures to a kind of clear finish, so I'm just going to add a little bit of colour powder. And then just a case of mixing the two together. But you need to thoroughly mix it. Okay, let's try filling the mould. Let's probably stay away from the shields with this. I'm wanting the silicone to kind of rise up over them I'm just hoping to avoid air bubbles, basically. And the Lego is not watertight, so I've put some tape around the outside just to try and stop anything running out. Okay, so being the amateur that I am at this, I didn't have quite enough silicone to come up to the level I wanted, so I just quickly mixed up a small amount and poured that on top. I did it very quickly, so it should make no difference at all to it. On the packet it says that the stuff there, the silicone, is toxic free. I still wore the gloves. It doesn't harm to wear the gloves while mixing this stuff up, just to avoid touching it directly. It's also odour free, and it says bubble free as well, so I'll be able to see if it does turn out without any bubbles or not. So this will need to be left pretty much overnight. I think it's at least 12 hours to go off completely, so I will check it tomorrow. Okay, this has been left overnight now, and it's certainly worked, or at least it seems to have worked. So let's have a look. I think if I just disassemble the Lego. Now I'm wondering if I can come at this from the other way. I managed to run down through some of the gaps here and there. It didn't get out of hand. I think what you'd want ideally is to remove the modelling clay, and all the pieces that you are casting still, or making a mould of, are still sat in the silicone and held in place, just so there's a consistency. But I suspect once I start trying to pull out this modelling clay, I'm going to start pulling out the shields with it. So the Lego bricks are all going to need a bit of clean up. So let's see if this clay will come away. I'm hoping it does. Okay, some of the things are going to pull out. Doesn't look too bad. Some of the modelling clay stuck to it, but I'll maybe try and clean that up. But overall, I think that's usable, I presume. I can see some of the shapes. There's impressions where the shields have been, and I would like to keep these in place if I can. And of course we'll leave the pouring spout here in. And I'm going to need to reset that piece. So what I'll need to do now is tidy this up a bit and then create some new walls around it to allow for the second pour of silicone, and get those other shields back in place. Okay, so I've rebuilt the Lego wall around that mould. If I were to do this again, would I use Lego? Probably not. You just end up getting lots of silicone onto the Lego bricks that you've got to clean up, so probably not worth it. I think some foam core with a glue gun to make a little compartment would work perfectly fine. I'm not so sure this is going to work. The detail just revealed in those spaces where the shields were. It's hard to tell. I mean, the details on the shields, or the shields, isn't that strong. You know, this one with the horse head on it, I mean, you can see it quite well there in the light. Maybe a millimetre's worth from the surface. It's just when I compare the silicone mould to something that I've done in the past, which looks a lot sharper to me in places. So I'm worried that the detail is a bit soft in this silicone. I don't know why that would be, or what I've done wrong. There may be some obvious thing that I've done wrong, or the stuff I've used. But I kind of need to see it through now and see what happens. So I'll just replace these shields that came out. Should roughly go back where they need to. So the last thing I need to do is just build up the wall again to get the thickness that I want. I'm going to spray some mould release on this. Silicone doesn't really stick to anything but itself, and if I just go and pour silicone right on top of that, it may just weld together and you won't get it apart. So I'll give it a spray with some mould release and then see what happens. Okay, same as before, 2-part silicone rubber mix. Get the 2 parts mixed together. Added some colour again. Yeah, it's pretty much exactly. So just a case of letting that cure for maybe up to 12 hours and then checking it later. So this top half is now cured, and we can have a look at what's happened. Will the silicone come apart? Okay, it's welded together, that's right. Okay, so that second pour of silicone has really gripped the Lego. So I am now concerned that this is not going to come apart very easily. So you can see the joining line between the two halves, but it looks like it's essentially just welded together. The mould release either didn't use enough or it's not done a good enough job. It's basically become one object. Okay, after some work with the scalpel, I've separated the 2 halves. I think it's now a disaster. They should have just peeled apart. I didn't use either enough or a good enough releasing agent to separate the 2 silicone pores. So I'm now left with something that I think will not work. I might spend a little bit of time and try and cut in some channels as I had planned to, maybe put back together and pour some resin. I'll see, but I can pretty much tell that just the way I had to cut that apart, that the shields aren't going to come out as I would have hoped, and they're not going to look how I would have hoped either, which is a shame. Okay, I've cleaned it up as best I can, sandwiched it together with some foam board and held it together with elastic bands, and I am just going to have a go at pouring it and seeing what happens. Got 2-part resin there, casting resin, so I'll mix up a small amount, won't need a lot, and pour it and see what happens. Okay, I've just pulled this apart, and to my surprise I actually see some shields, and I can see the detail on them. Hopefully you can see that. As I poured it, I didn't see the resin come up to the top here, and so I assumed it had failed or the resin couldn't make its way through it. The resin that I've used seems to have been liquid enough that it could flow in as I had hoped and up through the shields and these little rough areas where I've cut in some channels. Across here it didn't work. This one, let's just pull one out here. So it's like incomplete. I mean, I'm really happy with the detail on there and the thickness. My plan was always to be cleaning them up, you know, with a scalpel to get them back into a shield shape. See how they've almost worked. That one had a bit of an air bubble. Okay, that one is a complete shield, I think. The detail's really good on it. It's picked up all the original detail, which I'm surprised at. And all of these connected pieces I am thinking I can just clip off and then tidy up with the scalpel. And if there are any problems I could fill in with a little bit of green stuff or Tamiya grey putty stuff. So it looks like there's one or two good ones. There is a bit of wastage, but I think that's to be expected. In the same way when you buy resin pieces from Forge World, you know, they've got these large chunks of resin usually attached to them where they poured it. Yeah, let's just pull away a little bit of that shield. You can see it has captured the detail. And you just can't get that using some of the other methods I've tried with the press moulds, using milliput or, you know, the blue stuff, things like that. I just can't get the delicacy of the shield, you know, that thin shape. Really does need to be a pouring resin, and it's not as if there's really any air bubbles on that front surface either. Maybe you need to be a bit more careful how I take them out. It looks like the points in the shield will be quite fragile. Yeah, it's a pity that they're not all perfect. A little bit of sculpting could perhaps rescue the ones that aren't perfect. It's a mixed bag. I'm not going to say it's been a complete success, but it's proven to me that this is the right method. It's just the execution that could be improved. You've got to watch out how much you spend on doing this though, the cost of the silicone, the cost of the resin, and of course your own time. But I can definitely see this as being the way to do it. You know, the original there in the grey. It's a very good replica, just barring one or two points where it could be improved. The question is whether to carry on with this particular mould and try again and maybe get enough good results that I can put together the shields that I actually need. Yeah, that's a nice one there. The sea dragon coming out of the waves. Definitely room for improvement, but having gone that far with this mould, I could try again and see what I get. It's just such a pity that the mould release didn't work and allow me to get this apart without all that hassle, because I've had to go in and cut them apart, which has not been as good. This is pretty indicative of how they're coming out now. Get some leakage with it, and maybe a few good ones and then a few bad ones, that kind of thing. I've started looking at how to tidy up any of the shields that are maybe missing a point or a corner, and I'm finding that the Tamiya putty is really good for that. This stuff's kind of dried up a bit in the tube. I've had it open for a while, so I don't know if that's a help or a hindrance, but nonetheless it seems to be the right stuff for repairing the shapes. And I'm just using sanding sticks. You know, so if you've got any experience of working in the nail bar, probably got a good start. Also handy having one of these jewellery type files. It's got a radius on one side, so it kind of suits working on the inside of the shield. But I'm amazed at how well these are coming out, considering the mistakes I've made with the mould. Still getting a good result. So much so that it's even picking up, I don't know if you notice it on the end here, the proper plastic ones, that they're thicker on one side and then they come across to slightly thinner wall thickness, and that actually does get picked up in the mould. There's a really good channel on YouTube called The Dark Power, and the guy on there is a very talented sculptor and maker, and he creates all sorts of very cool things from scratch and does a lot of moulding with silicone and resin and all the rest of it. And he had a mould like this where he was almost treating it like a injection moulding process, where he had made like a plunger object that would push down in to where you've poured the resin, in the hope that you would then force the resin up into the shapes that you're trying to cast. So I'm going to give that a go. I might only get one go with it, because I'll get resin on here and that'll mean that it won't fit in again, but he was using some plastic that meant that you could peel off the resin and use it again. So yeah, I recommend you go and check out his channel, The Dark Power, on YouTube. It's got lots of good stuff on there. Overall, I think it's been, well, I don't want to say a complete success, because clearly it's not worked as I would have wanted. I made some mistakes, I made quite a few mistakes doing it, but it's been a learning process, and I've definitely picked up some things that I can apply to the next mould that I make for something similar. I reckon I've got enough good copies of the shield now that I can get the unit of High Elf Spearmen completed. I guess overall you've got to weigh up how much of your own time you put into it compared to the cost of buying these shields, but as I mentioned, they're quite expensive now on eBay, and I just fancied trying to reproduce my own. Hopefully you've gotten something useful out of this video. I know I have, at least, and the next time I'll hopefully be able to avoid making some of those mistakes again. But the next time you see these shields, they should be cleaned up and attached to my High Elves. Until then, thanks very much for watching the video.